recording so we can get on it.
Mhm.
All right. So I want to welcome you. Thank you so much for joining me, Mr. Ronald Jackson. You are the Executive Director of CDEMA, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency.
That's correct. It's my pleasure to join you this evening.
Yeah, same here. So I wanted to talk to you about the climate change agenda and how possibly COVID-19 is eclipsing the climate change agenda of the Caribbean.
Yeah,
So
that's an I think as we've seen.
say that over.
Well,
You got stuck there for a second.
no, so that's an excellent question. Globally, I think everybody's focused on the COVID-19 issue. It's a big issue. It's a pandemic. Many lives lost, many lives affected by it, to the point where the economic agenda globally is turned upside down. So I think that has drawn the attention and the focus of the entire globe, including those who would be champions politically of the climate change agenda. Here in the Caribbean, we've seen our own attention, while our numbers are not as large at this moment, it is on the uptick, and I think we ourselves are heavily focused on it. So much so, we at CDEMA, we've had to really try to balance the upcoming hurricane season. While we're talking about climate change, the implications of a dry period now, for example, in Barbados and many of the other islands, and the impending rainy season, which will come for some, which will lead us into a very active hurricane season, is something that we've had to try to bring the attention of our emergency managers and our political leaders back to center on, simply because we have no choice. We will be dealing with it when it comes. And so I do believe that it is somehow fading a little bit, but there are still those who are trying to ensure that the climate change agenda still remains center to the conversation. And insofar as we're able to link some of the climate change related issues that we would be contending with, juxtaposed to the coronavirus, the COVID-19 issues. So we're seeing where we're trying to link the two from the point of view of the proximity of what could be a multi-hazard context within which we're operating.
Right. I mean, so you said a lot in there that addresses some of the points that I have here. So first of all, let's talk about the parallels. So for instance, you have here climate change and COVID-19, the parallel between food security, the threats to food security, the threat to our health system. Talk a little bit more about those parallels.
So when we discuss climate change in its own space, we are really looking at the implications for a number of things, food security being one of them, in terms of the implications for seasonal rainfall and what that would do to annual yields. The prolonged dry conditions that would impact yield, but also the implication it has year over year for driving people out of the agro industry. Many of the small farming communities we've seen where it becomes more difficult for them each year, to the point where they're not encouraging their young ones to really take on that as a profession going forward. So it's multifaceted. It's what we're dealing with in the here and now, but also what we stand to lose in the longer term, where we're seeing more and more farmlands coming out of production because it is difficult, not only because of the decreasing rainfall, but the viability of the land itself, because the soil will also lose its nutrients and its effectiveness over time. Then we have to look at the COVID crisis and the impact it is having on the livelihood, on the labor force, where you're now potentially seeing people, becoming so ill that numerous farms, numerous production houses have had to close down. Recently, we're watching on the U.S. news, and there's a pig farm that has had to close its doors because the staff are all ill. Farmlands where their produce rotting in the fields because there's no one to harvest them. So, when we're dealing with what is a slow creeping problem, at the same time, we're now having to deal with the very present challenges that COVID-19 is posing to food security within the region and the globe. And we must recognize that right now we do import quite a bit of our food. So if we have a dependency for imports, that is also being disrupted by the challenges that are being faced in countries that we tend to look to import products from for the markets.
And then in regards to our public health system.
Right. And here now we look at climate change also and the impact it has on the environmental health component of things. Right now we would have been, if we cast our minds a few years back, you would have been dealing with CHIKV and Zika coming into January, February, and March. We would be looking at the whole threat of dengue as a result of the resurgence of those vectors as a result of the climate change phenomena, which we know have tend to provide a space, a breeding ground for those particular vectors. So our health systems would have had to go through this over several years. The public health space is one that remains very heightened for climate-related, environmental health-related hazards. And now we have on our hands the COVID-19 situation, which is putting our health sector on a strain. The health sector prior to COVID-19 would have already been not in the best position, the health infrastructure. And so now our ministries of health have had to be really planning, figuring out how they're going to manage a potential high caseload on an infrastructure that is already not in the best of shape. And this bearing in mind the potential for other issues to come down the line in terms of hurricane season, which could see increased health needs, as well as I've said before, the vectors that themselves can also bring additional pressures onto the health sector. So, we have to still, even as we deal with the clear and present danger that is COVID-19, we have to still be mindful of the seasonalities that climate change can bring, both in terms of the impact on food security and also on human health.
So in your talks with the region, because you take this disaster preparedness, disaster risk management, everything on a regional level, talking to all the heads of the respective governments and whatnot, what are they doing? How has that conversation been? Talking to different Caribbean countries about this present danger and the danger that lies ahead as the year goes on.
That's a very important question. I think in my engagement with the community recently, there is understandably a heavy focus on the COVID-19 issues. We have started to sensitize the various political directorate based on ministerial portfolio on the other issues that we're facing. Recently, we would have had to brief the COSHAD and the consulate. These are the health and security related governance arrangements for CARICOM in the region. There is, as you would have heard from the Honorable Prime Minister Motley, a pending emergency heads of government meeting where we have put to the Secretary General the need to also discuss the hurricane season and the implications that that could present for the region, but also the multi-hazard context, as I've said before, between the drought and the rainy season and the hurricane season. So, I mean, we're putting it on the agenda. We have shared several presentations on the need for us to really think through what a COVID scenario could mean within the context of the hurricane season. And so we're hoping that that will really bring sharp attention or some balance to the multiplicity of the challenges that we can face, or the multifaceted nature of the hazard landscape we have in the Caribbean. At the moment, what we're working on, which we will also elevate to the leadership of our member states, is refining our hurricane season checklist to really try to hone in on the potential challenges that a COVID-19 scenario could present. And this will help them to shift the focus a little bit to a balanced space on thinking through the food security issue, because that's part of our state of readiness, the shelter management issue, where some shelters are likely to be used as we see here in Barbados, to be used as isolation points. What would shelter mean for a community that may be seeing community spread of the COVID-19, but where you need to move people to security, safe shelter? What will that mean in terms of managing the social distancing arrangements that are being put in place? What does it mean for us to deploy assets into a country that may be themselves overwhelmed, both by COVID and by the hurricane? And will we be able to field the number of personnel and experts to be able to deploy in a safe context the procurement of goods for preparing for the hurricane season? We see already challenges in getting goods out of our traditional markets for preparing and responding to COVID. Could we see a similar problem in terms of our efforts to procure goods out of those markets as well? So there's a range of issues we have to think through when we talk about hurricane season readiness, that we have to really bring our heads of government and or disaster management ministers and security ministers to think through.
Yeah, definitely, especially in regards to budgets. If you look at what happened in Bahamas and last year, and how various governments came together financially to assist. Now in a situation where everybody's in an economic bind because of COVID-19, what will be the capability of the region to support each other?
Absolutely. And this brings us to why CDEMA was created. And and it's important that I raise this, because I think far too often we don't point to the good work we've done as a region in thinking way ahead. The creation of CDEMA came with the creation of what is called the Emergency Assistance Fund. It was a fund that was supposed to be invested in to the point where it could provide those resources that could facilitate a response to an affected country. And in view of that, it would be the member states themselves coming together through this fund to respond. So, we know now that given the COVID crisis and countries having not only to spend on health equipment and retrofitting building spaces, but also having to provide support packages for individuals who are on social support systems or who are on the edge of the lines of poverty, people who live day to day. So our governments are having to divert resources into addressing these issues. Some of these resources would have been set aside to be drawn down on in the event of a major hurricane. It is now having to serve the purposes of a COVID-19 scenario. And the question of whether it would be replenished in time for hurricane season is certainly something that I think they have to grapple with. And so it's very important that there is some thought. I'm not saying that the meetings and the planning sessions that they will have would necessarily yield the appropriate solution, but it would lead them to think through how they will cope in the face of these particular scenarios and challenges that can emerge given the current environment we're operating in now?
Well, in the current environment we're operating in, when you think about the region and everything that we've just discussed, is the region, if you think right now in this moment, is the region really ready for Mother Nature this year?
That's a that's an excellent question, and I'm always a very tough judge in terms of our readiness. It's something I've grappled with. I've often thought that as countries who have this particular challenge, there's more we can do. And so I would say collectively, and I'm never happy with where we are in terms of the level of readiness, because I know we can do more, and it is evident after each event, as you have pointed out, the outpouring not only of our governments, but of our citizens.
Yes.
And so it's really about how do we package that before the event occurs and channel that into a comprehensive readiness program that allows us to have the sort of predictable resources that can be deployed to either support one state or a multi-island situation. So it's there, it's within us as a region. It's how do we get to channel this into the preparatory stages and not leave it until the after event stages. So I think we're not there. I think we will have to, and we here now is the collective we, member governments with their emergency management mechanisms, CDEMA working in partnership with its regional community of actors, the media, civil society and the private sector. We're going to have to come together and try to influence the minds of our people around doing what we need to do, given the fact that we still have the hurricane season to contend with. We still have nature's potential blowback to deal with. You notice I didn't use the word wrath.
Yeah, I know. I know you're trying to, kind of make it easy, make it a little easy on us.
Yes, I think one of the things that challenges us sometimes is that we can be paralyzed by the fear,
right,
into thinking that we can't do anything, and there's much that we can do. So I'm trying to use words that will, encourage us not to be fearful, but to see this as something that we can in fact tackle if we put our minds to it, and if we're working together on the problem. So that's the message I want to send around that. So we're not there, but we can be there. But it's going to take a collective effort to kind of shape the thinking around what we need to do to get us there. I'm hoping that out of a very bad situation, which is the COVID-19, can come a sort of cultural shift to how we deal with these situations of crisis at all levels. So, we're hoping that, this could be the sort of start of the transformative agenda that we want to see. We present the COVID-19 crisis within the context of resilience. We don't divorce it from the conversation we're having around resilience. And so we're hoping that, the transformative processes, governance arrangements, the cultural shifts that are necessary to see us become more of a resilience people, and not speak of resilience only in the fact that we will survive this, because we will, and they will say we're resilient. I'm talking about in terms of our practices and the pillars that we look at when
active
we talk
resilience.
Yes, active resilience.
Yes.
Yeah.
So since we're trying not to be all doom and gloom, from an environmental perspective, what has the impact of COVID-19 done for the environment?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that question, because I've had to. I feel like I'm living Groundhog Day some of the days. In the very early days of the 24-hour shutdown, or before we got to 24, I was still one of only 2 or so staff members who worked from the office. I shifted our office operations into work from home protocols. But I went in every day, as to my IT manager, who himself has to make sure that if we're all working from home, the systems can function. But for the last 2 weeks, I've tried my best to stay at home, and I feel like I'm living Groundhog Day. But what I do is I go out on the porch and I have a cup of coffee, and you observe nature. You listen to the birds, you watch the limbs on the tree sway. Even the lizards are coming a little bit close to you. They're running across my porch. And I thought to myself, I looked up in the sky and I didn't see a plane. And we are all struggling, and I would say some of us are even dealing with it with very high stress, some of which we don't know, the fact that we have to be locked up in our homes. But I think nature is the ultimate winner of what's happening. I think the Mother Nature is getting a chance to breathe. We don't know how much of a repair that will do within the context of the climate changing, damage we've done to Mother Earth, which is going to take a much longer time to repair. But the nature is getting a chance, I would say, to stretch, and that can't be a bad thing. And so again, as I said, we're seeing really dark days for some families who are having to lose loved ones during this period. But we can take comfort of the fact that those who are fortunate enough to remain, and those of us who are doing what we need to do as per the directives, nature is renewing herself as best as she can to be there to continue to serve us. And I'm hoping that at the end of it as well, at the end of all of this, that we would also remember the need for us to be good stewards to Mother Earth. So these are, part of it is my own upbringing and background. I grew up running through bushes down to the river, sitting by the riverside, going into the wooded areas, doing all kinds of things in nature. So I'm very close to nature. I gave up Urbana for suburbia or the countryside, because I love that. So there's a part of me, is cheering for nature at this point in time, that she's getting a chance to breathe, and that can't be a bad thing. But I think we need to take care of her when we are able to go back out in our numbers. Things that we've been wasting time on in terms of our waste management programs, or full recycling programs, reusing, even things like double piping opportunities for how we can conserve water. These are things now we need to stop putting off and start doing. Yes, it's going to take resources, but I'm one who, just like we talk about adaptation, it's an incrementalist approach. So we can get there, we have to start. And so I'm hoping that out of this we will help Mother Nature as she seeks to help us.
So let's talk about that then. How can we help? What advice do you have for citizens and governments? What can we do in this time to make things a little easier on ourselves as this year goes along? We spoke about the hurricane season, but you also spoke about drought. And the unfortunate thing about that is that we're dealing with a virus that you need to be washing your hands constantly. And so you're always using your hands. As soon as you go outside or you are in public, you got to come in and bathe right away. Sometimes people are taking 2 or 3 showers. So there's the things to combat coronavirus can affect our reserves in regards to water use and all that kind of stuff. What can we do?
Yeah, isn't it ironic, huh?
Yeah.
And this is all happening to us now in a very dry period. So I think all the things we've been taught, and that has come again full circle when we're in a drought period, remains relevant in terms of not wasting the water to do things that we may want to not prioritize. So yes, we all like to have a nice shiny car, but we may want to pass on that, and to focus, because as you said, the way to beat this virus is through cleanliness. You're gonna want the water. So give up washing the car, and focus on sanitizing your hands and your body. Look at how we shower. People like to shower and just run. I mean, all of us do it. We run the shower and we run the shower. We now need to, wet up our wash rags, soap it up, turn the pipe off, and then use enough water just to make sure we're clean and not have the shower just running and running.
Well, now that you say that, this is what drives me nuts when sometimes I see, especially in the United States, actually, sorry, but when people are showing you the correct way to wash your hands, they're washing their hands and the water is running through the tap.
Absolutely.
And running. It drives me crazy. I'm like,
crazy. It's crazy.
Turn off the tap.
Correct. And you know what? Quite frankly, I think one of the things we have to do is also collect water. Go back to storing water. We are not in a situation yet where the BWA has been saying that. I mean, they've said one or two of their catchments are low.
Yes.
But they've not implemented, as far as I've heard, any stringent measures. But we shouldn't wait. I think we need to store some water. We need to, as I said, reduce unnecessary use of water. And what I would say beyond now is when all of this is done, if each one of us can plant a tree, in a symbolic way for those who we may have lost along the way in our respective country, because I think we need that. We need to green up the place again, as a means of encouraging even more precipitation in our space.
Right.
So what we can do now, but also what we should do afterwards. If we can all plant some trees and see if we can get an environment that is much cooler, that will encourage more precipitation and moisture retention, so that we can get to the stage where our water supply is again being generated in natural ways. But for now, we have to conserve. And I think individually we have to do our part in that regard. We also need to look at, as we've said before, limiting while we are under the 24-hour curfew or the self-quarantining. We should also limit the opportunities for us to have to come back in and be washing everything, because that's also...
That's true, because when you come in, you got to wash the chair off your clothes, put them in the washing machine, everything like that. So, yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, if you don't have a load of laundry to wash, then you're not being efficient because washing machine uses a certain volume of water. And so there are things we can do. We can wear, or at least some articles of our clothing, maybe a couple days, since we're not going out in public regularly. We don't have to be changing often and having to use more water. So just simple things, small things, and I think it adds up. It adds up.
What is the worst thing that we can do in this COVID-19 time? What's the worst thing we could do that would totally reverse all the work that CDEMA is doing? What's the lessons that we can't afford to miss?
Well, I think the biggest lesson coming out of the COVID experience, which transcends all hazards, is the importance of preparedness, and prevention. This whole thing, we growing up, we say it. We even say it when we're schooling our kids. Ounce of prevention is better than cure. But I think we've struggled individually in our lives when it comes on to managing hazards, and this is across the Caribbean, to really apply that adage. Worst thing we can do is to drop our guard and to not take every opportunity to apply preventative measures and to prepare ourselves for any hazards. The Caribbean is the second most hazard-prone place in the world. You know, this part of the world, second most hazard-prone. And so therefore, we have to recognize that we live with it. If it's not a hurricane, it's going to be a tropical storm. It's going to be a long, dry conditions, occasioning droughts. It's going to be an extreme rainfall event. It's going to be an earthquake. It's going to be a volcano. It's going to be an environmental health issue, an epidemic, a pandemic. It will come because, you know, we live in that context. So I think the worst we could do is in eroding the gains is to go back to a state where we feel as though a state of complacency, where things don't happen for a while and we feel it won't happen. It will, and we've seen that it will. I mean, the pandemic is a classic example. We weren't around in 1917, 1918, but there was a pandemic on the land at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one prior to that. And you can go all the way back and back and back in history. And you will find...
Yeah, the Spanish flu. Spanish flu in 1920s, yeah, 19,
right.
yeah.
You know, we heard just the other day where Italy had to turn towards something that culturally they were, I mean, through generations of plague, and quarantine, the term quarantine actually emerged from Italy.
You broke up there a second. So go back to the Italy.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I was saying that Italy, you know, I learned just recently that the word quarantine is from Italy because that's how they had to deal with the plague, right? Where everyone had to go into their homes for 40 days. So the point I'm making is that, you know, these things they go through a cycle. Some say 100 years, you know, some of them are 50 years, some are 5 years. We're now in the era of climate change where we're seeing now every 2 to 3 years. So the point I'm making is that we should not erase the gains in terms of the lessons we've had to learn over the last decade based on having been impacted or watched other countries being impacted and seeing our brothers and sisters across the region grapple with the challenging environment that is created by these impacts. We can't drop our guard. We have to keep sailing ahead with these practices, keep on transforming, keep on recognizing that this is what we live with, and so we must learn to put in the sort of measures that allow us to coexist with an environment that's been part of us forever.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I would have to offer.
So I mean, is there anything else? Well, you answered all my questions.
I'm glad I could.
Yeah. Huh? Is there anything that you want to get out? Is there anything that you want people to know?
Well, what do I want? I think I've said it, but you know, really and truly, I think we have to see. One of my pet peeves is that I'm concerned that as a Caribbean community, we spend too much time tackling the challenges we are facing in silos. We spend too much time packaging things up under a particular banner and less time focusing on what are the core issues that we need to really grab hold of and which will make us truly resilient, truly successful in dealing with these things. And, you know, and so for me, it's not about talking about climate change or talking about disaster risk, or it's about what are the underlying drivers that have led us to be in the situation we are in. And if we don't tackle those, we can talk about climate change until the cows come home. We won't move further. So it's about how do we begin to address the context of our society that themselves are the worst affected by these events. And we've seen it in floods, in chickpea, in environmental health issues, in earthquakes, in COVID-19. It is the individuals that live with the issues associated with being poor and marginal. Those are the ones that are struggling all the time to cope with these problems and to recover from it. So I think if we're able to figure out the sort of measures that can be comprehensively applied, that will address that sector of our society, because it is also a huge cost on our government. So we have to look at what systems, what are the shock responsive systems that can, help governments and the people through those challenging times. That is going to be something that is going to be beneficial, whether it is going to be the long-term implications of climate, whether it is a short-term weather-related issues, or whether it is a pandemic issue. And that's what I mean. If we're not tackling those core fundamentals, if we're not looking at things like or building regulatory practices, then we can talk about climate change all we want. If we're not addressing that, then buildings are going to be damaged, people are going to be displaced, governments are going to face high costs to rebuild and reconstruct. So that's, for me, the message, even as I look to a new professional role in the coming weeks. That's the message I want to leave with my Caribbean people.
So the other thing is, and I'm getting back to that. I don't think I.
so before things like the underlying drivers: land use, land management, building codes, environmental preservation,
the mentality of the people.
Yeah, I'm coming
attitude,
to that. I'm coming to that because attitude is also framed by education and the enforcement of the laws of the land. If we don't do both, right, then we won't be able to change that. So we have to continue to educate our people. One of the things I've been saying is that, risk management, because what we're doing is managing risk. Risk management shouldn't just be a conversation that is happening with the financial and insurance people. It should be a conversation happening across all sectors of government life, the private sector, and civil society. So we're whatever you're studying, we must learn about the management of risk. It's like when I was growing up, and later on people say, "Oh, why is it we don't teach civics in school? We don't teach our people about our Caribbean and the history of the Caribbean and what it means to be." It's the same thing. We live with risk, so we have to teach everybody about how we manage risk. It shouldn't just be the domain for me or for the people in the financial sector. So I think that has to help shape culture and shape attitude, but we also must ensure that the laws of the land is upheld, because if you break that barrier as well, you're opening yourself up to a situation that can become a snowball that becomes too big to handle or manage.
And counterproductive.
It is.
Yeah. So back to that news you're trying to drop on me, man.
Yeah. Huh?
What? So you're gone? What? Talk to me.
I've called time on my career at CDEMA.
Really?
Yeah.
So okay, cool. So you're in the coming weeks, you will be.
In a couple of weeks, I will be. I should have been moving to Geneva to serve in a capacity of head of disaster risk reduction, recovery, and resilience building with the UNDP.
UNDP. Okay, congratulations, sir.
A global role, yeah. So.
Okay, has that been made public yet? Should I not include this in the interview?
Well, I haven't made it. I haven't made it public. I haven't made it public. It's only public to the people who I have to notify of my resignation, and my colleagues who I've had to in the CARICOM regional institutions that I've had to notify, and the emergency management agency personnel.
Okay.
and our development partner. So they all know, but the media
Okay.
doesn't know.
Okay. So I should not include this then until you're ready to say what you gotta say.
You're gonna have to tell them when you see them, because I'm not the kind of guy who tells the media. So I
You
was
can't
smiling
give
to
me a
myself.
scoop. You can't give
Huh?
me a scoop like this and then got me don't know what to do.
It's up to you. It's up to you. It's up
Okay.
to you. Because
Okay.
in 3 weeks, if they call me to speak on it from a CDEMA perspective,
Mm-hmm.
then I will decline, because I
Okay,
won't be
gotcha.
representing CDEMA anymore. So I can't speak I wouldn't be speaking on behalf of CDEMA.
The wonderful thing though is that you will be still representing the Caribbean as far as
Absolutely.
speaking for us on that level, that
Absolutely,
platform.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I would be in a global service, but I think it's important. I do think it's important that the Caribbean people are striving to take on leadership role in those spaces. And even as we serve on a global level, we can still be good ambassadors and advocates for our community. Because I think part of it too is the need is always going to be the need for the global framers of policy and programs to appreciate context. And if we are not in that space to help with that, understanding of context, then our context will be shaped by persons who may not know, and are perhaps shaping it from experiences that they may have, which are not necessarily reflective of our space. So I think it's
Exactly.
important that we serve, and that we also make space for others to serve, and then we move on to a different space. So I've
Awesome.
I've enjoyed my tenure tremendously, and it is kind of bittersweet, because there are a lot of things that we have set up to move forward for the next 5 years that I will miss as
Yeah.
they unfold. But
Yeah.
the next leader will have that as an opportunity.
Who's the successor?
We don't know.
Oh,
That's gonna be, there's a process for that,
okay,
and
cool.
in fact, when I finish with you here, I'm gonna send out the note to the chairman, in advising him on the acting arrangements and the steps that must now be initiated for the search for the appropriate successor.
Well, I mean, you drop a bomb on me. Well, not even a bomb, a
And
flourishing
just
cloud of
exactly,
feathers and
yes, that
stars
exactly.
and glitter.
That's
It's not a bomb,
that's
it's glitter.
exactly. That's what
Right?
I
You know what I mean? You drop
I
some
watch it.
great news on me, and this
I
is,
wa-
I think is exciting. It's an exciting venture for you to be moving on to the UNDP and representing us with disaster risk management and climate change issues, and being that voice for the Caribbean on the global level. So you're going Geneva, right? You're going
Yeah,
far.
when things are when we're back to being able to move, that's where my duty station is supposed to be.
Wow. Okay.
But for
Wow.
now, I will work from, like everybody else. We're all working from home.
Oh, great. Right. Right.
So
And your family, they're doing well.
they're doing well. They're doing
Oh,
well. They're
okay.
coping.
All
I
right.
think the
Good.
children. I think the children that was born, in this generation, and the last let's say 15, 20 years of children around the world are more equipped
Mm-hmm.
to deal with this environment, because a lot
Mm-hmm.
of them live virtually. So
Exactly. They're digital natives. We're the digital immigrants. You know what I mean?
correct.
So
That's
so
correct. That's
yeah.
correct.
So I'm
That's
sure they're
correct.
definitely getting accustomed and being able to be on their iPads and their gaming systems or
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
watching TV. So I
And they already are networking. They've been networking with their friends virtually before this. So
that's so
it's
true.
not it's not a strange environment for them to be socializing
That's
in,
true.
because that's what they've been doing for a while. So
That's true.
they're adapting faster. My children are adapting faster than we are.
Yeah, I could tell you that because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I'd be like, nobody to talk to.
Exactly,
Yeah, it
exactly,
drives me nuts.
exactly,
After a
exactly,
while, I
exactly.
just go on my patio and be like, oh, outside.
Yes,
You know?
yes, yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
interesting the things we
yeah.
take for granted. But
We, we
this has been
exactly.
fantastic. Thank you so much, Ronald,
I
for
hope I
joining
was
me.
able to really provide some value to your program. And I know it's been
Definitely.
a good series.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's very important that we don't allow the climate change agenda and the whole aspect of disaster preparedness to be clouded or eclipsed by this, because we don't want that months from now we're like, ooh, and we're caught with our pants down because we've been
Absolutely.
so focused on, which is something very important to be focused on, but knowing that there is an inevitable threat that we face every year, and it's getting more and more frequent, and even more dangerous. So
Absolutely, absolutely.
yeah.
And that is one of the reasons why very early we said, we have to split the focus of the team to look
Mm.
at keeping our focus on those matters related to climate change that we work on, even as much as we're supporting on the health related matters related to the pandemic. So it's the same message we have to carry through to all.
And now that you say that, it's very important to then highlight to, especially to viewers, that CDEMA is not just about hurricanes or
No,
natural disasters, but you deal with every aspect of it: disaster prevention, preparedness in every way, form, or fashion, whether it be the health sector, even the aspects of energy and the things that are at
absolutely,
risk because of disasters. And
absolutely.
COVID-19 in this situation is a disaster.
It is a
So
disaster. It is a disaster. And that's why you see so many countries have actually turned to their legislation. Some of them declaring national disasters, some of them evoking the Emergency Management Act as a means of really clearing way to deal with a situation that is truly one which is likely to overwhelm the day-to-day capacity of the country. So,
yeah.
it's what we promote. We talk about CDM as a brand. CDM is comprehensive disaster management.
Mhm.
But behind that is really more, it's much more deeper than that. It is really about the integrated management of risk. So it's really an integrated risk management agenda that looks at all elements of it, those that are influenced by climate, those that are man-induced, those that are geophysical in nature, all part of what we are called to deal with at the agency, some of which we're doing better than some because we have a frequency that allows us to kind of hone skills in that regard. But it's certainly something we have to look at all of it and how we leverage the platform to do it. And what is important, because we have tried our best to get out of the minds of our public that we're only about the crisis, only about the response. There's a large part of our portfolio that is involving preparedness and prevention work. And coming out of 2017 events, another side of our business, which was dormant because of financing, has been awakened, and that is on the recovery planning side. So we have a good program which we're going to be launching. I was hoping to launch that before the COVID crisis took over, and I was hoping to launch it before as I said, I stepped away. But the leadership who will act ad interim, and the new leadership will have that, and it's something that we will be launching pretty soon. Our resilient recovery facility. That's the more program there. So our work really is multifaceted and not only focused on response, which is only one side of the business. And that is very much, framed. Interestingly enough, 2017, a lot of people started talking about resilience,
Mhm.
and people would have been hailing things like the CRIF previously. A lot of those things were documented in the emergence of CDEMA back in 1989, 1990. The whole idea around a pool insurance product was addressed then, right? Conversations around the housing stock and reducing its vulnerability and exposure by 80% was things referenced then. So we in the region, we've been ahead of the game. We've just unfortunately not been faithful as we should on keeping the momentum going with the things we've been very creative at framing in the Caribbean. This is me telling us, our Caribbean brothers and sisters, that we are there. We just need to stay with it.
And follow
Press
through.
on. Follow through, yeah.
And so it's important to then state and know that CDEMA, CCRE, all the different agencies around there, it's not seasonal. This is not a seasonal thing.
No.
It is not. So because it's not just about implementation or execution, it's about strategy, planning, and foresight.
Absolutely.
And that's what you guys have to do, and that's what you do.
Absolutely. You said it perfectly. You're my big poster on CDEMA and our foresight and our execution and our strategy. You said it perfectly.
Yes. I know. I've seen the work you've done. I've had the opportunity to see it from an inside point of view and how it's affected other organizations in doing their work. So I am a big fan of CDEMA and what y'all accomplished for the region. CARICOM.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and
my great pleasure.
Congratulations on your new appointment.
Thank you.
And I want you to, take it to the next level. I know you will. I know you will take it to the
I'll
next
do my
level.
best.
To represent us well.
Indeed. And stay safe. And hopefully I get to see you when all of this clears.
Yes, that would be great. Everybody.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Ronald.
All right. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you.